Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5-part webinar series on community management. I am your moderator, Judy Gordon, the Vice President of Marketing for OmniSparx. And Joe, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Joe. You may know me as Disruption Joe. I am the founder at Chicago Blockchain Project.
Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping tips. You should see the chat function in your view. Please enter any questions there or on the OmniSparx Telegram channel at OmniSparx. We will be answering any questions at the end. Today is the 4th webinar in our series. We're going to talk about tips for building a successful community. Before we get started, I want to give you a quick introduction to the sponsors. OmniSparx is the premier collaboration platform for crypto organizations to create and share value within their communities. For more information, visit omnisparx.io. The Chicago Blockchain Project is building an infrastructure for the city of Chicago, connecting builders with resources and investors. Now we're ready to start the webinar. Today I'd like to introduce David Spinks, who's the CEO of the CMX Group. David?
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction and for having me. Excited to be here and share some of our frameworks for building community. Oh, just skipped that one. So I'm David Spinks. I'm the CEO of CMX. We're an organization that provides training, education, and community for community professionals and community teams. So we've worked with hundreds of different companies, helping them launch their community strategies. We've developed educational programs for Facebook. We've trained teams at Google, at Salesforce. We've basically had an opportunity to, over the last 5 years, work with a wide range of teams in blockchain and nonprofits and education, all to help them launch and grow and engage community programs. And so over the years, we've developed a lot of different frameworks around how to do this work, and I'm going to be sharing one of those with you today. All of our work revolves around this one simple question of how do you build belonging? So when we talk about building community, we're not talking about just building an audience. We're not talking about just getting people to follow you. We're talking about actually creating a sense of community amongst a group of people. We're talking about giving people a sense of belonging, a shared identity, make them feel safe amongst a group. When organizations are able to do this, when they're truly able to build belonging, that's where you drive extreme loyalty. People want to be involved, they want to contribute, they want to help, they want to support each other. And it opens up a lot of opportunity to empower your community members to contribute to your mission, to your goals as a business as well. And it just creates more value for your customers and your members, because now not only are they using your products, but they're actually finding a connection and people and a sense of belonging by being involved, which today is more important than ever, as loneliness is only getting higher and higher around the world. So we believe this is really important work, both in terms of helping businesses be successful and achieve their goals, and also actually helping people fight loneliness and find belonging. And so the model that I'm going to be sharing with you today is called the 7 Ps of community. This is our highest level framework. It's an overview of community strategy. If you're from marketing, you might know the 4 Ps of marketing, the marketing mix. So it's kind of the highest level of marketing, very similar for community. And so you can use this framework to plan out community from the ground up. If you're launching a new community program, like an event or a forum or something like that, you can use this to help you plan that. Or if you already have your community going, you can use this as a way of auditing your existing community to make sure you're thinking about all the core pieces of community and you're doing it well. All right, so I'm going to go through this model. We have about 30 minutes to go through it all. I'm going to share some examples of companies and communities that are implementing each of the 7 Ps, and we'll open up for questions at the end. So make sure to note any of the questions you have, and we'll open up at the end after the presentation. Cool. So our first example is a company called Yelp. Many of you probably know Yelp. It's where everyone today goes to get restaurant reviews and museum reviews and just find out if the place they're going to is going to be cool. When it first started, it was just a few developers that were running the platform, and they didn't have anyone focused on community, on getting people to actually use the product. So they hired someone named Nish Nataraja. That's the guy over here to the left. And Nish was brought in as the head of community. His job was to get people to post reviews and contribute to the platform, because they can build all the best technology in the world, but if people aren't on Yelp using it, it's not going to work. So they hired Nish and said, great, go build our community, right? That's what a lot of community managers hear when they join companies. Great, you're hired, now go ahead, build community, whatever that means. For Nish, what it really meant was he had to start by understanding who it was that they were focused on. At that time, there were other kinds of restaurant review publications and websites, things like Zagat, that were much more traditional, very like official restaurant reviews. And he knew that they wanted Yelp to be something different, something for more average people, something that everyone can use and contribute to. And so he started by trying to understand, who are the people using this platform? What makes them unique? What are their motivations? What's really important to them? So he started by just getting on the phone and talking to people, by meeting people in person, and started by organizing events and just getting people together so he can learn, who are these people and what do they want? And what he found was the people that were using Yelp, that were contributing to Yelp, they saw themselves as tastemakers. They were that friend in your friend group that always knew about the new restaurant opening before anyone else, or knew about the new exhibit before anyone else. They love to be in the know. They love to get access to exclusive things. They like to be that tastemaker in their group and in their community. And so he focused on that. And he thought about, how can we build a program that would focus on supporting that kind of person and giving them the rewards that they're looking for. And so he launched the Yelp Elite. The Yelp Elite is still a program that's now running in hundreds of cities all over the world. Every single city has its own local community and a community manager, at least one community manager leading that group. And they provide all their Yelp Elite members with access to restaurants, with access to new openings, with perks, with swag, and they throw all these exclusive events for them throughout the year. And so he built an entire program focused on who is that person that we want to be contributing on this platform and what's important to them. And the Yelp Elite has been pretty strongly credited with the success of Yelp, because if you run any community, you know that a very small percentage, something like 1%, will be your contributors, right? And so he knew that 1%, which is their Yelp Elite, they need to take really good care of them, because they're going to be contributing 80% of the content on the platform. And so that is the first P in the 7P model. It's people. Who are your members? If you're starting to build a community and you haven't taken the first steps of talking to people, getting to know who they are, getting to know what their motivations are, where are they going for community now? Where can't they find community and express themselves in the way they want to? You need to spend a lot of time really understanding your people, developing personas, so you can build a community program that's unique to them. So you want to start with people. Know who is your member and who isn't your member, right? One good thing that Nish did was he figured out, we're not for that traditional restaurant reviewer. We're not for the mom and dad kind of what they're looking for in a restaurant. They were focused on a younger generation. They were focused on those tastemakers, people who are very active on the internet. And so he specifically focused on who it was for and who it wasn't for, right? And every community is going to have some group that it's not for. You want to learn who your members aspire to be. We join communities to grow as people and to achieve our goals, whether it's religion or a business or AA. We're all trying to change something. We're trying to improve our lives in some way. So when you're building community, think about who your members want to be and how can you build a community with rewards and programming that align with who they aspire to be. And then finally, reward your power users. You're going to find, again, a very small percentage of your community is going to be creating most of the content and be the most active and answer most of the questions. So figure out who they are and how you can reward them properly. Another person who did this really well is Erica Cool, who's here over to the right, along with Holly Firestone, who both work on community at Salesforce now. Erica Cool, she joined Salesforce, I think it was over 15 years ago. She was working not in community at first, but believed that community would be really valuable for them. So she basically pitched the CMO on launching a community program. He said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're an amazing employee, because she's been there for several years and has been successful. So he said, go ahead, try it out. And they were able to launch these prototypes and launch these programs for community that was focused on driving retention, right? So because she was in the marketing department, she knew that the only way she was going to get buy-in for community in her organization was to align with marketing goals. So she focused on how many of our customers who are participating in the community are coming back because they're in the community. How is it impacting our retention? How is it impacting our customer lifetime value? And she really tried to focus on one problem first, even though she had a vision for community growing and becoming a large part of Salesforce on the product side, on the support side, on innovation side. And so she really tried to figure out why she was starting it and make sure she focused on that first. And that worked out really well. Today, the Salesforce MVP program and their various community programs are all over the world. They host local events. They have online communities. Community is now becoming a part of all the different departments and different products that Salesforce has, and it's become a huge part of their competitive advantage. And it's because Erica started with a very specific goal first. And what we try to do with community sometimes, because it can impact every part of a business, right? You can drive ambassadors, you can collect content for your marketing, you can provide a support forum, you can fuel customer success. There's all these different things you can do in your community, but it's really important that you know why you're starting it, and you know why it's valuable for your members as well. Right? So you start with people and understand who they are and why your community serves them. And then you want to understand, why does community serve your business? And so that brings us to the second P of purpose. Why does your community exist? Who is it for is number one. Number two is, why does a community exist? These are two extremely, extremely important things to figure out when you're building a community. So many companies skip these two parts. They don't think about who they're really serving. They don't really focus on why they're building that community, but it's extremely important, because the platform you use, whether it's Telegram or Slack or Discourse or any other community platform, the kinds of events you host, the content you create, everything you do in your community is going to have to be rooted in this very specific core purpose. The number one reason that communities fail is because they lack internal support and resources. This is from a study that we did of over 500 companies. It was 533 companies. We asked them, how are they measuring the value of community and what's causing communities to fail? The number one reason was because they didn't have enough support and resources. And we see this happen time and time and time again in every kind of organization, because they don't get very, very clear on what their objective is. You have to know why the community is valuable to your business before you start working on it. Don't launch a community and then later try to figure out how it's valuable for your business, because you're gonna be backtracking and you're not going to be able to justify the support and resources. So if you're the community manager, you're going to be understaffed and you're going to be under-resourced. If you're the CEO or the founder, you're not going to be able to justify continuing to invest in these programs unless you understand what the value is. So we use a really simple framework at CMX to help businesses figure out what their objective is. It's called the Spark framework. So you can break down community into these 5 areas of business that it fits into one of these 5. Number one is support. So it's like a support forum. If your customers have questions, you can create a space where they can answer questions for each other instead of just going through your traditional support channels. Number 2 is product. That's where your community is actually helping you improve your product and fuel innovation. So they're sharing ideas, they're giving you feedback. They might be participating in focus groups. You're basically creating spaces for your community to give you feedback and help you improve your product. Number 3 is acquisition. This is like an ambassador program where your members are promoting your brand for you, promoting your product, and they're advocating for you. Maybe they're hosting events, writing content, whatever. Number 4 is retention, which means by participating in your community, you're actually increasing their retention rate. They're sticking around longer. They're staying a customer or contributor for a longer time. And number 5 is contribution. For a lot of you who have developer platforms or developer ecosystems, those are all contribution kind of communities where you're building a community of people who are contributing to a platform. So for Yelp, those are the reviewers. For Airbnb, it's the hosts. For open source, it's developers. Anywhere where people are contributing the content that actually makes your product, that builds the product itself, that's a contribution. So you need to figure out which of these 5 do you want to focus on, and I recommend choosing one to start. Right? What we tend to do, again, is try to do all of these things. We try to boil the ocean. We try to do everything at once, but we highly recommend choose one that's most aligned with your business's most pressing needs, that you think you can do really well, that you can measure the value of. Focus on that thing, and then you'll be able to add more over time. And that doesn't mean you're not going to see the value from the other areas. If you have a support forum, you're still going to have advocates promoting you because they like you. But if you focus on one, you can choose very specific metrics. You can choose the right platform, and you can achieve that objective, and then justify growing it into the other areas where you're seeing that value. Another community that did a really good job of defining their purpose, not on the business value side, but just on understanding their purpose, understanding why they exist, why they're unique, is the dinner party. So Carla Fernandez and Lennon Flowers are the founders, and it's a community where people come together who have experienced severe loss, the loss of a parent, the loss of a loved one. Both Carla and Lennon unfortunately experienced that. And when they tried to find support, they tried to find you're building your community. Now you need to figure out what is the right place, what's the right space, where are you gathering people? It could be online, it could be offline, it could be a big event and as a conference, it could be a small event, it could be a potluck dinner, it could be a brunch, it could be a Slack group, right? The options are greater than ever for building community and bringing people together. And you want to choose a place that's going to be aligned with the people, aligned with the purpose, and conducive to your community. And so it really depends. Again, you have to start with people and your purpose. So the Ironclad community is for lawyers. It's a community that helps lawyers support each other and answer questions for each other. And they looked at all these enterprise platforms and software and different places to bring their community together. But lawyers are busy, and they don't necessarily want to join a whole new community, a whole new platform. And so what they ultimately found is that the best way for their community to interact with each other was just email. So they built this email-driven community platform. I believe they tested it with Google Groups, and that's what worked, because the barrier to entry was way too high to get them to participate in another community space. They focused on the one that aligned with their people and their existing habits. So you have to think about the habits of your people, and are you going to be able to change those habits? Is that something you want to do? It's extremely hard to change your habits. That's why a lot of companies are just launching Facebook groups or Slack groups or other spaces now, because you're not changing their habit. They're already there. But if you are able to change your habit and bring them into a new space, a new form, now you're not just giving more to the Facebooks and Slacks of the world. You're actually creating a new space and a new habit and a new routine for people, which can be much more powerful in the long run. Think about Burning Man as an example, right? They did not choose the most convenient place to organize an event. It takes hours to get there. It takes 11 hours to get out. There's one goddamn road to get in and out of this thing. If you've ever been to Burning Man, getting out of Burning Man is the worst experience ever. It's in the desert. It's freezing at night. It's too hot in the day. It's dust. There's dust storms everywhere. It's just the world. Who would think to host an event there? But for their people and for their purpose, this is the perfect place. It makes you feel like you're completely out of the real world. It makes you feel like you're on another planet. It helps you detach from the rest of the world. And that's the experience that they wanted to create. It's also a big blank canvas. And they knew it was really important in Burning Man that everyone builds the experience together. And so they needed just a blank canvas where anyone can do that. So again, something that might seem completely irrational for most communities, if you understand your people and your purpose, you might find that there's a place that's unique to your community that probably no one else can do, and that's going to make it a much more powerful experience. Now that you know why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, and where are you doing it, you have to figure out what are they doing there, right? So what are people going to do in that space? How do you want them to interact? It's not enough to just open the doors, say welcome, have fun, figure it out yourselves. You want to facilitate participation and help create experiences within your space that are going to be engaging, that are going to keep people coming back, and help them take the actions that you need to see in order to justify this community, right? So if you built a support forum and your goal is to provide support to your customers, you need to facilitate that kind of participation to make sure it's happening and people are getting that value. Someone who figured this out really well is Douglas Atkin. This is him speaking at our conference a few years ago. Douglas ran community at Meetup. He ran community at Airbnb. He wrote a book called Culting of Brands. Highly recommend it. He co-founded the Peers Foundation, which is an advocacy group for collaborative consumption. So Douglas he's OG, one of the most badass people I know in this space. And what he did is figured out early on when he was at Meetup running community there was that they needed to figure out how to bring people to ultimately take this big action of hosting their own Meetup, of hosting their own event. But they were asking them to do that right away, right? You ask someone to join Meetup, they join Meetup, and then right away you say, great, now host your first event. That's a huge ask when they are just very early in their experience with the community. So what he did is he developed something called the commitment curve. And so as you can see here, he basically drew out this curve that says over time, somebody's commitment in your community will go up, and you can map out all the actions of your community along that curve. And so you can think about what are the actions that are a pretty big ask that we may not want to ask them to do right away, right? If someone joins your beta, and you're asking them to build on your platform, the first ask might not be like launch an app on our platform. It might be like add your name to the community and introduce yourself, right? So small asks at first, and then you build up over time to bigger asks. This is just a way of kind of mapping out the content. This isn't necessarily a user journey that says someone's going to follow this exact path. They might skip ahead, they might fall back, they might fall off and become inactive. But this is just a way for you to visualize, here are all the things that someone can do in our community and how we can actually organize it over time to make sure we're asking them at a point when they're ready to actually take that action. Another thing you can do is create recurring experiences. So if you think of any community in the world that's been around for a long time, is really successful, they have recurring experiences, right? Like if you go to church, you have church on Sunday every week, you have your high holidays. Every religion has these recurring experiences that you know are going to happen at the same time every week or every year. Online communities that do weekly newsletters or weekly threads, you create these routines and things because that trains your members to keep coming back, and they now know what to expect each time. So you can do that in many ways, and one simple way you can do that is just write out daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or whatever time frames you want, and under each one put down something or a bunch of ideas for what you can do in that time frame, right? So this is based on what we do at CMX. So we have online community, we host conferences, we host local events, and so daily we're creating discussion prompts, right? Every day we're in our community asking questions, prompting discussions, trying to just fuel that activity. Weekly, every week we post a new welcome thread. So every Monday, we post a thread, we tag all of our new members, we say welcome, we ask them 3 questions to answer so they can introduce themselves. That happens every week, every Monday morning. In our pro community, that's our paid membership, every Monday we start by doing goal setting. So everyone shares their goals and priorities for the week, and they share any obstacles they have. At the end of the week, we do weekly reflection. So everyone shares how their week went, what's bringing them joy, what's bringing them pain, and what their intentions are for the next week. So we create these recurring experiences on a weekly basis. Weekly is really important because that tends to be the cadence that people think in and work in, right? We work on a weekly basis. We have our weekends every week. We have our classes every week. So you want to build into that kind of routine that people already have. And we build a lot of that into our pro membership. Monthly, we're hosting in-person meetups. About once a quarter, we'll do a big research report like that value and metrics report that I mentioned earlier. And then once a year, we host CMX Summit, which is our big annual conference. You want the participation to be meaningful as well. There's certainly a state of the internet right now where community is being thrown around a lot, and people say, yeah, we're building a community, and you go in and it's just bunch of cat memes and people just responding with bullshit. That's not really meaningful interaction, right? And we heard this from Facebook over the last year. They changed their whole mission to be all about bringing people together and connecting people. And they said they're trying to build meaningful participation, not just engagement, just not more activity, right? That's quantity based, and that's important. It's important people are there and they're active, but you want to make sure that interaction and that activity is meaningful. So this is James McCleary in the picture here, and he's the CEO of the Inside Circle Foundation. It's a really, really amazing community. They go into maximum security prisons and work with the inmates there to create circles, these trust circles where they can share their emotions and their experiences and anything they want openly and safely, which is unreal for people, for the people in there. They've never really had a safe space to express themselves, certainly not in prison, where, you know, vulnerability is not going to help you out very much. So they put on this armor. What they actually do to fuel this like meaningful participation there is every single person who enters the room, before they enter the room, they actually take off their imaginary armor, they take off their imaginary mask, and then they enter the room. And every single person who enters the room will go through that same ritual, that same process. And what that does is it tells everyone in the room that they've all removed their armor and they're there for the same reasons. They're there to be open and vulnerable. And so, you know, it's those kinds of processes that has made this community program extremely successful. And when I met James and I asked him about, you know, what really works for you, he said it's all about their policy. So that's the fifth P, your policy for your community, extremely important. It's the values that you have in your community. It's the rules and the guidelines for how to participate, how not to participate, what's okay, what's not okay, because these are the things that you're going to tell your community members you're safe here, and they're going to show them how to participate and how to not participate in this space. So they have these rules and these procedures in the Inside Circle Foundation that ensures that the experience is safe and meaningful for all of their members, and it's had extraordinary impact for all of them. Some of these inmates go on to get early releases because their entire behavior and demeanor changes. They go on to volunteer in programs and give back to this community. It's had an insane impact for people who, you know, otherwise couldn't share any of this stuff anywhere else in the world. They have 5 very simple rules there. 1, make members feel safe and included. 2, guide members on how to participate in this is just general advice for policies. Make members feel safe and included. Guide members on how to participate in a quality way. Be brief enough to remember in your policies and your guidelines. You don't want to have this really long page that like no one's actually going to read. It's okay to, you should also have your terms of service, and that's going to be a lot longer, but have a very brief version of your rules that are just real quick. Everyone can read it, remember it, and know what's the culture of this community. Encourage positivity. A lot of the time our rules and guidelines can be very negative. Don't do this, don't do this. You know, it kind of communicates that you don't trust your members. So communicate positivity and encourage positivity. Encourage them to be positive towards each other. You don't want to create a community where there's a lot of negativity and challenging and abrasiveness. There's enough of that on the internet. The beauty of smaller communities online is you can create these pockets of positivity and support. And explain how it will be enforced. No one's going to follow your rules and guidelines if they don't think there's any repercussions for breaking the rules and guidelines. So explain up front, like, hey, if you know this happens, you'll get a warning, and then on the 3rd warning, basically, you'll be banned. On the 2nd one, you'll be suspended. Whatever your policy is, make sure to communicate that up front so people know it's for real. Someone else who's done a really good job of setting policy in their community is Ryan Hoover. Many of you may know Ryan already. He's the founder of Product Hunts, a good friend of mine that invited me to participate in this community in the really early days. So I got to kind of see it from the ground up. And one thing that he did, again, in that encouraging positivity mindset, he said, this is not a space to rag on founders or put down people and their products, right? There's the hacker news culture that was out there at the time that was always, people would launch something and everyone would just shit on it. They would tear it down. They would, you know, say all the reasons that it's going to fail. for Ryan, it was really important that he created a space where people would support creators and product builders. Even if it seemed like a silly idea, he's always had this belief that it could still be really impactful. And he was able to do this because he started it very small. When it started, it wasn't the big Product Hunt platform. It started with just brunches and a group of people getting together in these small ways. And so, what he did is he grew the community thoughtfully, which brings us to our 6P of promotion. So, when you're thinking about promoting your community, we tend to want to just grow as quickly as possible, especially in crypto. It's all about like creating this idea, this perception that you're growing really fast. Your Telegram group's really blowing up, and so you're able to, raise more money or get more awareness. And look, I understand, and that's valuable. And from a marketing perspective, you definitely want to grow and give out good signal. From a community perspective, actually growing very, very fast can be the worst thing for a community sometimes. But again, it goes back to your purpose and why you're building your community. So make sure you understand, are you building this thing to grow fast and put out more signal? Or are you trying to create a really strong culture and something that's going to have a good foundation for the long run? So your community will thrive and exist and contribute for the next 10 years, not just for the 5 months that you're blasting through these growth goals. And so that's what Ryan did when he started. Product Hunt was just brunches. It was just a bunch of founders getting together. It was about 10 to 30 people tops getting together for brunch. And by doing that, he was able to curate the people to put people who already had a predisposition to being positive, right? He chose people who were good people, who were positive, who were supportive, who weren't going to be negative and tear each other down. That meant when he invited the next 100,000 people, or however many are at Product Hunt now, they saw that example, they saw that experience, they saw that culture, and they followed suit, right? They saw that this is a place to be positive. So even if their predisposition wasn't to be positive, now they knew that's what's happening in this space. So by starting small and curated, you get to shape your culture in a much more positive way by choosing people who are already aligned with that culture before adding the masses. All big things start small. So if you're worried about, oh, well, I can't start small because it's not going to be big, Genius is a massive platform now where people share their they share lyrics to songs and now annotate everything on the web. Started as a 200-person email list. Twitter was an internal communication tool. Slack, internal communication tool. They were building a virtual world, not Slack. Facebook started as a hot or not in one school. Instagram was a feature in a check-in app. AngelList started as a blog and then had 25 investors on an email list. Reddit was one page where they had to pretend to be users because they didn't have enough people on there. And then Knot started with a magazine and also pretended to be users before they launched their large communities. So everything that you see that's really big today started really small. And that's where their culture was created. And then by building the right foundation, that's what allowed them to grow big and expand in the future. So start small and dream big. All right. Don't be afraid to start small and curated. Take a few months, take 6 months, take a year if you need to get the community and the culture and the people right. And then start growing it and start adding more. Even New York City, as you can see here, started, even here, it still looks kind of big, but it started as just grassland. And today it's, an insanely massive city. What Product Hunt did then, once you have that foundation, then you can empower that small community to bring more people. So a really smart thing that Product Hunt did is they gave all of those initial people who joined, those like the first 100 people in Product Hunt, invites. At first, we each got 3 invites, and that allowed us, because the community was so valuable, I cared about who I invited. Right? If it was just 10,000 people, I don't care. I'll just send it out to anyone. But it was 100 people of curated, quality, positive people. So if I brought someone into that space, you can be sure that I was being thoughtful about that and wanting to bring good people. And so start to empower your core to now bring in more people and build that culture around you. And now Product Hunt, starting small, starting as a brunch. This is a tweet from I think a year or 2 ago. AngelList and Product Hunt meetup, line literally all the way around the block for a meetup. Their community events are bigger than ever now. So remember to align your promotion with purpose, right? The Women's March the largest march in US history. Obviously for them, size was really important, so they focused on size, getting more people activated and out there on the streets. But for your community, you have to ask, do we want to have this massive movement? Is that what's important? Or do we want to start small and build a core culture? And finally, I know over time here, so I'm going to go quick through performance. This is a really key part in any community strategy, because how do you know if it's working unless you're able to actually measure it and you've defined your success, all right? So don't skip over performance. Community, like everything else, needs to have metrics behind it, and you need to measure how it's going. We break down measurement into 3 levels. One is your content. So is your blog post, is your post in the community, is your event, is the article you wrote, anything that you create, the specific content, is that working? And you have metrics associated with each kind of content to see, is that resonating? Is it working in our community? Number 2 is participation. Are your members actively engaged and having a positive experience? Remember, it's quantity and quality. So are they there? What's your daily active users? What are your monthly active users? But then also be surveying and interviewing to make sure that it's a quality experience and the questions and answers are deep and thoughtful and not just very shallow kind of interaction. And then third, and very important, is your objective. Are you achieving your organization's goals, going all the way back to purpose, where we shared the Spark model? You need to know which one of those are you focusing on and make sure you're measuring your community's impact on that objective, whether it's support, product, acquisition, retention, or contribution. You need to know and measure how it's impacting that objective so you can justify investing more, building your community team, launching more events and platforms. Otherwise, you're just going to be building something that feels good, but you don't know if it's actually good for your business. All right, so tracking your performance, always start with a specific question in mind, right? It doesn't make sense just to gather vanity metrics for the sake of it. Have a question in your mind. Should we do the blog post series again? Is our community platform the right space? Are we achieving our goal for our business? Know what question you're asking so your data can help you find that answer. 2, no one metric will tell the full story. So anyone who says like just MAU is all you need, monthly active users, no, you need to combine that with qualitative metrics. You need to also look at, what's the comment per question rate? How many people are active? You want to collect a range of metrics that help you understand if you're actually driving that value. Number 3 is just start. Measurement is complicated and intimidating for every space. It can be especially difficult in community because there's so many moving pieces and it's not super clear how to measure community all the time. This is something we're all still kind of learning together, but just start. Right? Once you just start putting numbers into your spreadsheet, once you start tracking this stuff, you'll learn, you'll figure out where your gaps are, you'll figure out what your questions are and what you need to find in order to answer those questions. So just start small, put one foot in front of the other, and your measurement program will evolve over time. And so that's it. Those are the 7 P's of community. To review again, we have people, who are your members; purpose, why does your community exist; place, where are they gathering; participation, what are they doing in that space and how are you facilitating that participation; policy, are the values, the guidelines and rules that craft how people should treat each other and what they should or shouldn't do in your community; promotion is how your community grows, could be slowly, could be fast; performance is how is success measured. You can use the 7 P's to map out your community plan, to project for the future, to audit your existing community. So take this model, and you can find more articles on our site on the 7 P's that have prompting questions for each of the 7 P's that you can go through, answer those questions for yourself, and use it as a way to kind of analyze your existing community program. All right, real quick, CMX, our mission is to help community professionals thrive. This is the work we do every day. Again, we've worked with thousands of different organizations that have been in our community. We've trained hundreds of communities ourselves. And so this is the work we do. If you need support in community building and your community strategy, please get in touch. I'm David at cmxhub.com. You can email me anytime. And we definitely invite you to become a member of our community. You can join us at cmxhub.com/pro. This is where we're providing this kind of support every day. We're running our own programs, events, expert calls, training, modules, and supporting hundreds of teams in building their community programs. So if you want to get support as you're going through your journey, please join our community at cmxhub.com/pro. And thanks for the work you're all doing. If you're here, it's probably because you're building community. Like I said, loneliness is epidemic right now. It's a huge issue in our world. So just a reminder that the work you're doing isn't just good for your business, but it can actually help people find belonging and remove loneliness. And I think that's probably the most important thing in the world right now. So thanks for listening. Hope this was helpful, and we'll open up for questions now.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much. So a lot of people on the webinar are from cryptocurrency projects. And you brought up when you were talking about, I think it was participation, one of the P's, that a lot of these projects grew their communities very quickly, mostly to help them market for ICOs or for other reasons. So I have actually two questions for you. So it turns out that a lot of the communities have a lot of people who can be negative, or ask a lot about investments or things that maybe don't help build the project. So I kind of wanted to ask you about strategies for managing people who tend to be more negative. And then two, I wanted to ask you about, so I've built this huge community. I have a lot of people. What kind of strategies, or how would you think about maybe bringing people up that curve that you showed?
Yeah, so managing negativity, I think if you're growing your community really fast and just open the floodgates to everyone, you're going to have an issue with it, and your only options are going to be reactive. And you can be reactive. You have your guidelines, you have your rules, you'll enforce it, you'll try to remind people what to do. But by growing fast and not curating who's in the group, you are giving up the opportunity to be proactive and making sure the people in your community are positive and they understand why they're there. They understand the culture in a thoughtful way. So creating more barriers to entry will improve the positivity and the energy in the community, because it'll make sure more of the right people are there to start and setting a good example. I understand that's not always the goal, and for some, it's important to grow their Telegram group. So, if you're going to do that, just recognize there's going to be negativity, and you want to consistently and quickly remind people when they are negative or when they are bringing that it doesn't align with the community culture. Just remind them that you want everyone to take a positive approach, and it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to challenge things, but remind them of the culture and the rules. You want to set the example as much as possible. So you yourself need to be really positive, really supportive, and you want to have community members in your space that are being positive and supportive. And when people are being positive and supported, highlight that example. Thank them publicly for being supportive, for helping someone else. Maybe there was a situation where they could have been negative, but they took the high road. Call that out and say, thanks for doing that. Thank them personally, thank them publicly. And then just keep in mind, like what I see a lot of crypto companies doing, or they start with the Telegram, it grows, it's noisy and not that valuable, but they keep it as kind of like an entry point to the community, rather than like their core community. And then they end up launching something like a discourse or something a little bit more controlled and structured. And then they invite their core members, the people who are valuable, who are contributing, who are positive, into a more controlled, more private space. So you can do it that way too. But, candidly, if you're launching a Telegram and just growing it at all costs, you're going to have negativity and you're giving up your ability to control the culture.
Okay, great. Oh, go ahead.
Well, there's a second question too, right?
Yeah. So the question was about, so again, community is so important with these decentralized organizations. They really need people to be involved, to be successful. Yeah. So, with these large Telegram groups, you answered it a little bit, but how can you start to bring these members kind of up that curve? Do you have any suggestions, or, if someone who's done it well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so only a very small percentage of people are going to get to the top of that curve. There's the 80-20 rule or the 99-1 rule in community, which says 1% is going to contribute, 9% will respond, and 90% will passively consume. And so if you are trying to optimize for that curve, what you need to do is identify those people that are moving up the curve that will move up quickly and then support them, right? So some platforms will do this for you, like Discourse has trust level. So as someone becomes more active and involved in the community, they can move up to like a trust level 2, and now they can get more access to moderation tools and things like that. So you give them power, right? You give them autonomy. As they become more involved, you say, great, awesome, thank you. As a reward, we're going to give you more power and influence and autonomy in the community. And just think about your onboarding experience. So when someone joins your community, you don't want to overwhelm them with too many asks and too big asks. You want to start simple and have just like a regular cadence and drip of insights and different things they can do, different things they can check out over time. You don't want to dump it all on them at once because they're going to get overwhelmed and they're not going to be able to do all the things on that curve.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've run out of time. Thank you so much. This was extremely helpful. I'll just share my email. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, jgordon@omnisparx.io. And David, you want to share your email again one last time for everyone?
Yeah, david@cmxhub.com.
And again, reach out on our Telegram. Next week is the last community webinar in our series. We're going to have Adam from Consensus and Brady from District 0x and Camille Landau from OmniSparx talking about community management in crypto and tips and advice for how to build and grow community. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everyone.